Welcome into the NHL Insider Notebook here on the BR app, streaming as well live on the Bleacher Report YouTube page. Let's make this an interactive show. We've got Halloween behind us, the first month of the NHL behind us, and we've got Trick or Treat to hand out. Well, we kind of did that already last weekend, didn't we? But there's some tricks or treats in the NHL, and we'll be there to sift through all of that. Let's make this an interactive show. As mentioned, we are streaming live on the BR app as well as YouTube. Throw your questions, comments into the chat. What I want to hear from you today is, what does, after 1 month of the NHL season, what does your inner circle of Stanley Cup contenders look like? You can only pick 5. None of this give me 10 teams that could win the Stanley Cup. 16 make the playoffs. That doesn't help anyone. Give me your top 5 teams that you have as Stanley Cup contenders right now on November 3rd, and we'll talk about them throughout the show with the first month of the season behind us. We've got a lot to get to today. You can see the rundown here on the right side of your screen, but I want to start with a comment from Nathan Weber in the chat. He says, "Hey Frank, you're amazing." Oh, that's nice. My kids don't even say that. Thanks, Nathan. He says, "Is there any truth to Connor Bedard's side just wanting a 5-year deal? And if so, is that concerning if he isn't interested in signing an 8-year deal?" First off, no, not concerning. Were Toronto Maple Leafs fans concerned when Austin Matthews signed a 5-year deal out of the chute of his entry-level deal? No. 2, I think it also depends, Nathan, on when Connor Bedard signs his deal. If he waits until after July 1st, which obviously there's plenty of time between now and then, but if he waits until after July 1st, the most years that he could sign for anyway ratchets down to 7 as per the collective bargaining agreement changes. So it does change the specter of that slightly. An 8-year deal would need to get done before the calendar turns to July 1st. And more than that, I just think the salary cap environment is changing. I don't think there's anything that's been decided in terms of term or dollars when it comes to Connor Bedard. And there have been a couple nice additional price points that have been set that I think are huge. Getting that Logan Cooley deal done, also the 3rd largest contract ever signed out of entry level, is another really important data point. When you consider where Connor Bedard is at in his career, maybe the only other interesting data point would be is if they waited again until after July 1st and Macklin Celebrini signs his next contract first. But short of that, I think the Hawks and the Bedard camp have pretty much all the data that they would need to get a deal done. But neither side is really in a rush to do that. And I don't think it should be viewed in any sort of negative light. They're just taking their time. He's playing on the entry-level deal. There's no reason to rush. And so they're going to sift through and see where things stand. The two sides have remained in communication. It's not like they've put it on ice and said, hey, we're waiting until after the season's over. But as far as I know, and I did check in on this file over the last couple of days, they haven't had any substantive talks of late. So interesting to keep an eye on. So let's talk about the Edmonton Oilers. They have been really good on home ice, and kind of a bizarre scene, by the way, in Edmonton over the weekend with the Blue Jays game being shown on their Jumbotron, Game 7. I understand everyone in Canada is hyped up, but when Connor McDavid was talking after the game about how distracting it was with the game being on the Jumbotron, he found himself watching it while he was on the bench. And then while he had the puck on the ice or was playing, you could hear fans oohing and ahhing. And he's like, well, are they talking about the Blue Jays game? What's happening? Or did someone do something on the ice that I need to know of? It was pretty disconcerting. So they did get that straightened out, of course. And a lot of people thought playing in the game that the Jays had won Game 7, which is kind of amazing. Funny to see how that worked out. But what happens with the Oilers lineup? We had been talking for the last few weeks about the logjam that could be coming for general manager Stan Bowman if everyone is healthy once you see Zach Hyman return to the lineup. He was eligible to return on Saturday. Zach Hyman was skating with the extras today in St. Louis as the Oilers get ready to face the Blues tonight. My guess is we see Zach Hyman back within 7 calendar days. I would think November 10th is sort of the end of the time frame that Zach Hyman is looking at, but they've got too many players if everyone's healthy. There are no injuries between now and then, and particularly too many defensemen. Now, there was some talk over the weekend about the potentiality of moving Troy Stecher. One name that I would throw out there as well is Ty Emberson. Yes, the Oilers did sign Emerson to an extension. Yes, he was a nice piece that they had picked up from the Sharks in the Cody Ceci trade. A nice sort of stopgap player. But when it comes to moving the needle for the Oilers, I think Alec Regula is going to be a big step up for them as a full-time presence in their lineup. We see how different that team is with Jake Wallman from a puck moving perspective. So I personally, this is just my opinion, I would keep Troy Stecher. I think he's the league's perfect number 7, 6'7". And I know the kids out there just doing the whole 6'7" thing when I said that, but he truly is the league's perfect 6'7" because he's low maintenance. He comes in, plays like a pro every time, and he makes basically league minimum on the salary cap. So he doesn't cost you an arm and a leg, which is exactly what the Oilers need as they're counting every dollar. So I would move Emerson first. I think he's a nice player. I don't think he's a have-to-have player, and I actually think the Oilers could find some value for him on the trade market. But are they trying to find a different solution for Troy Stecher? Keep an eye on that. Let's take a peek at the chat. We got some guys throwing in their inner circle of cup contenders, and James is the first respondent so far. He says James Henderson has Winnipeg, Colorado, Vegas, Montreal, and New Jersey. Love the Montreal pick, James. Montreal is my sort of Cinderella. They go on a run to the Cup final this year. I think it's still probably a bit of a reach, but you tell me with the wide open Eastern Conference why they can't be one of the teams that burst through. I'm not as sold on New Jersey. I think Winnipeg has been overly reliant on Connor Hellebuck to bail them out. And I just don't think Winnipeg's defense is good enough to get through. So Colorado and Vegas, I mean, you're not going to find any argument from me. Colorado has been stake in the ground, best team in the NHL to start. And I would say that I would also definitely have Carolina in my top 5. And we'll talk about the Canes. Actually, we'll do that right now because the Canes are on our rundown today. And the Carolina Hurricanes, yes, are on the prowl on the trade market. They are looking for a defenseman. Speaking of Ty Emerson, I mentioned stopgap defenseman. That's exactly the type of style player that the Carolina Hurricanes are looking for. They've had significant injuries. I can't believe all the guys that have gone down in the Carolina Hurricanes lineup so far. Not just guys, but impact players that have been out. And look specifically at their blue line. It's been banged up. Shane Gostisbehere, Keandre Miller, Jacob Slavin. I mean, you're talking about one half of your defense core and definitely their most important defenseman in Jacob Slavin. So being without those guys and getting off to a 7-3 start this season, beating some of those teams that we're talking about in that intercup contender category, that's been hugely impressive for Carolina. And one other note to keep in mind with Carolina, they've got an interesting situation brewing with Brandon Bussi, who's really been quite good. Speaking of injuries, coming up in relief for Pyotr Kochetkov. We know that Freddie Anderson at times, of course, goes down with injury. You can set your watch to it at any given point in the season. Brandon Bussi has come in and given them some really nice efforts. His stats are pretty good. I think he has a .916 save percentage, if my memory serves me correctly, over 4 games. And with Kochetkov being activated, I don't think Carolina wants to just throw Bussi back on waivers and allow someone else to claim a really valuable third goalie. They're going to have to pay attention to the situation quite closely. So I think that's also a situation worth watching. Carolina looking for a defenseman. And then also, what do they do with Brandon Bussi? See, cats in our YouTube chat or our BR app chat throwing out there. Could Carolina get a big goalie trade this season? I doubt it, but I think they're definitely monitoring the goaltending market. My concern, Cats, would be that they don't want to spend a lot on goaltending. Like, it isn't going to be something that they're going to throw massive assets at. And 2, I just don't see anything that's available on the goaltending market that would really get them excited. That's one story that really bears watching, is that the quality of goaltenders that are available, they're just so far and few between that unless you really feel confident about prying someone loose, an up-and-comer or someone that you think could rebound, whose game has been on the skids, I don't know where Carolina would find that guy, because anyone that's got any modicum of goaltending is doing their best to hang on to it. James says, good morning. What's up, James? That's James Gordon. James Henderson says, do you think the Jets will give Brad Lambert a little more time, or we go back to the Moose when Lowry, Perfetti, and now Barron come back? Good question. I think they'd like to see more from Brad Lambert. I just don't know where they're going to find that lineup spot when all those guys that you mentioned are healthy, and looking forward to seeing Adam Lowry get back to doing his thing. It's going to really, in my view, change or transform the view of the Winnipeg Jets, because if you can go 1, 2, 3 down the middle, Scheifele, Lowry, Taves in any order, I think the Jets are going to be really well situated at that center position. Ryan, well, not the real Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, but the faux YouTube chat Ryan Nugent-Hopkins says, what do you think a return for Ty Emerson would look like? Maybe that's a way for the Oilers to replenish a decent pick to throw back in their arsenal, because they've had so few. They're going to need to replenish and turn that over, and maybe even use that later on in the season for some collateral when it comes to the NHL trade deadline. James Gordon says, how about the way Dan Vladar is playing in Philly? Love to see it. I'm a big Dan Vladar fan, and I think he's one of those guys getting that opportunity that's really going to suit him well. That was his modus operandi, his mission, his mandate to make a change leaving Calgary. Calgary was interested in re-signing him. By the way, all the haters in Calgary who were all over Devin Cooley saying he's not going to play up to the level in the NHL, his numbers are awesome. So I don't know where that concern comes from. But Dan Vladar is still relatively young when it comes to the overall NHL goaltending picture. There's no reason why he can't blossom into being a true, or become a full-fledged number one in the NHL. That's still potentially in the cards for him, having broken into the NHL on a full-time basis pretty early on in his career at the age of 24. So Evgeny Malkin was fine, and that ties into perfectly with our 2 Pittsburgh Penguins topics on our rundown today. You know, we've seen Evgeny Malkin lose his cool before and slash players, but pretty ugly one over the weekend. And I guess I don't understand where that comes from. When you've gotten into stick swinging incidents before, which we've seen from Evgeny Malkin, why not just cool it? It's not okay to turn around and two-hand someone like he did over the weekend, which, again, we've seen him do multiple times throughout the course of his NHL career. It is a weapon. Please be careful, sir. When it comes to the Pittsburgh Penguins and their overall dominance this season, it's been one of the great stories of the NHL. They have been a turn back the clock team, a team that has really done an excellent job finding contributions, not just from their stars, their superstars, but all over their lineup. And the Justin Brazeau addition has been big. The minutes and time that they've gotten out of their measured expectations from the 2 teenagers in their lineup has been important. Dan Muse has been a big deal. And just changing the vibe or view of that team. It's been really fun to watch. Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, and Erik Karlsson, for that instance, have been phenomenal. Here's my only question with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and why I am concerned about the sustainability of their start. We just talked from the beginning of the show about trick or treat. Is the Penguins start a trick, or is it a treat? I mean, it's been a treat to watch, but I think overall I'm going to say it's a trick. And the reason for that is I don't know that Artur Shilovs and Tristan Jarry in net can continue to play as well as they have all season long. Their combined save percentage heading into the weekend was .921. For reference, Connor Hellebuck has been the best goalie in the league, winning Vezinas at the .925, .926 level. So can those 2 guys that were basically on the scrap heap, I mean, Tristan Jarry was a buyout candidate if his contract wasn't buyout proof, and Artur Shilovs was a guy who couldn't get the job done for the Vancouver Canucks when given an opportunity when Thatcher Demko was out. They lost trust and faith in him, so they move on from him. These 2 guys landed in Pittsburgh with one of, an older core of their roster, and all of a sudden they're world beaters. Those types of things can happen over the first month of a season But can they sustain that level of goaltending to keep up? I don't think they defend nearly well enough. The numbers would indicate that that's true. At some point, is there a downturn in the goaltending here that sees the Pittsburgh Penguins sort of slowly come back to earth? I would argue that that's what's likely on tap, or at least what the numbers indicate is on tap. But every year in the NHL, we see stuff that happens that we never saw coming. No one saw this start from the Pittsburgh Penguins coming, and 4 to 6 teams every year seemingly make the playoffs that we did not expect. So the NHL is incredibly hard to predict, and not only that, but the shift from last place to playoff spot this year is even more jumbled. Take a look at this one message this tweet that was sent out from the BR account, the BR Open Ice account, which if you're not following, it's a must follow. But take a look at the standings. Every team in the Eastern Conference waking up today north of 500. This is your reminder that 500 isn't any good in the NHL's point system. Do you know what 500 gets you in the NHL? 82 points. Do you know what it's required to make the Stanley Cup playoffs? 95. Getting 82 points isn't good. So the league average this season is actually 586. And okay, you say, okay, league average, fine. The threshold to get to 95 points is like 568, 569. But if the league average this year is 586, and average meaning, the middle, and half the teams in the NHL make it and half don't, we might see an even higher point threshold this year to make the NHL playoffs. It might be 97-ish points. Anyway, just a reminder for you, a couple things. One, 500 isn't any good. And two, what's separating first from last is not that much. And three, when it comes to teams finding their footing in the NHL, don't look at the standings in October and November by points. Sort it by points percentage, because the teams have not played the same number of games. It's a reminder I always say, it's the best prism to view everyone through is using that points percentage tab on the standings, because you got one team that's played 8 games, another team that's played 11 games, or whatever it is. That's not a true indication, is by looking merely just at points. So we touched on the Pittsburgh Penguins, Evgeny Malkin, the Edmonton Oilers, and Carolina Hurricanes, and some potential trade rumors. Reminder, if you haven't done so already, throw your inner circle 5 teams of Stanley Cup contenders, true Stanley Cup contenders, as you see it right now on Monday, November 3rd. And I will give you mine when we get to the end of the show. You've already gotten a hint. After talking about James and his 5, I've got 3 from his 5. I have Colorado, Vegas, and yes, the Carolina Hurricanes. So everyone on the app and in our YouTube chat wants to talk about Artemi Panarin. New York Rangers, Artemi Panarin. What's happening? When are they trading him? Where are they trading him? Well, slow your roll is the first thing I would say. I know everyone's excited, but we are a long, long way from the NHL trade deadline, which is in March. Yes, extension talks between the New York Rangers and Artemi Panarin's camp have been very slow. But I still think the Rangers ultimately want to understand what kind of team they have first. They're coming off of winning 3 of 4 on their Western road trip. And by the way, speaking of the standings, they've now vaulted themselves back into a playoff position by virtue of that 3-1 trip. And similarly, the Boston Bruins, who were in last place in the Eastern Conference, are now back close to a playoff spot and squarely in the mix again after winning 3 straight. That's all it takes. But go do a deep dive on the numbers with the Rangers. The Rangers have defended the best in terms of expected goals in the entire NHL so far through the first month of the season. The best, number 1. And so think about what we've said about the Rangers over the last number of years, which is a team that has been over-reliant on Igor Shesterkin and has really played poorly and sloppy in their own end through 3 different head coaches, through multiple personnel changes on their back end. They've now got the coach in Mike Sullivan, who's finally putting the structure in place. They've changed out their personnel and they look and feel different. They're defending totally differently than they were. That is their recipe for success. I've said it before. I am bullish on the Broadway Blue Shirts getting back to being a playoff team this year because of the way that they're defending. Now they need to figure out, can they score? Do they have enough threats up front to score? I think the answer to that is yes, but they need a lot more, particularly starting with the number 1 overall pick that they've paid in Alexis Lafreniere. He needs to get going. JT Miller, he's bringing the heartbeat and the engine. And Artemi Panarin is part of that solution. So until we really know what the New York Rangers are, I don't believe that they're going to cut their nose off to spite their face on this season and make a move right now to trade Artemi Panarin. I don't see that happening. I think they want to understand where their team fits in the hierarchy of the Eastern Conference and the overall NHL before making any drastic decisions. They've been very happy with Panarin's production since he's arrived as a free agent. He's obviously a huge part of this team, and he could go down arguably as one of the best free agent signings of all time when you think about how he entered, what he's produced at, the rate, and also how successful the Rangers have been coming out of a rebuild and him shepherding them into a new era of New York Rangers hockey. Look, everyone's excited for the Panarin trade talk. I mentioned the Carolina Hurricanes as being one of those teams that is closely monitoring the situation. They're not alone. But it's going to be fascinating to watch all this come together because the Rangers want some more time to figure out what they've got before they make any more drastic measures. All right, let's check out some of these inner circle cup contenders here. Mr. 2006 here, he has his 5 of Vegas, Colorado, New Jersey, Carolina, and Tampa. Okay, Tampa's an interesting choice. Not going to fight you on Tampa. But I think, yes, even though they've won 5 straight games, they have been a pretty disappointing team so far. And I know they're in a great playoff spot and they've rebounded in a big way and their superstars have been a lot better the last handful of games. They just look slow to me. Maybe that's just me. I don't have Tampa in my cup contender category, but you've got 3 of my 5, Vegas, Colorado, and Carolina. I understand the New Jersey pick as well. So James Gordon throws in Colorado, Vegas, Florida, Dallas, and Winnipeg. I've got Florida in there as well. I've got the Dallas Stars on the fence. They have not looked good this season, and they have really struggled. They've won a few games in a row again, despite 28th in the league in terms of chances created. It's been a very strange season in Dallas. But how do you count out Florida? I mean, all the things that we said about Florida before, they've tread water this season. They're without not just Matthew Tkachuk, but also Alexander Barkov, and then add in a Dmitry Kulikov, and all of a sudden, like, you begin to really go to a different layer of your team. They haven't ruled Barkov out for the season. We know Matthew Tkachuk will be back likely in 1 month's time, and I like the Panthers to find a fit, even if Barkov won't return, to plug someone else into their lineup because they've been ultra aggressive. They can use his money later on. They just haven't done that yet, and they're providing themselves with the ultimate flexibility. So I think even though they haven't played like it through the first month of the season, you have to have Florida somewhere in your top 5. So 4 of my top 5, Vegas, Colorado, Carolina, and Florida. Does anyone want to guess on the 5th one? From Richie in the YouTube chat, with all the big 2026 free agents pretty much all extended, how do you think this changes Chris Drury's strategy going into this year's trade deadline with potentially $30 million in cap space this offseason? Look, again, I think it goes back to, Richie, the answer to the question is, what are the New York Rangers? Are they a contender or are they a pretender? Because if they are a pretender, I think what you're going to do is see him continue to pick at this and potentially move out pieces to rejig what this group looks like, because I don't see them hanging on to players just for the sake of doing it. Despite some interesting contractual situations, they're going to need to find takers to really reinvent themselves. I do not see the New York Rangers standing still. He's been ultra aggressive at every turn. Determined that the team wasn't good enough. Okay, Kreider and Trouba are gone. Bring in JT Miller. Okay, what's the next iteration of that? It starts with trading Panarin, but will it also include some of the other players in the lineup that they could find value for to reboot this thing? I think the answer to that is yes. So when it comes to the other side of it, what happens if the Rangers could be a contender or they are in that mix? Again, I don't think he's going to be shy to go out and add. That's his general posture, but he needs to learn more about what this Ranger team is. Frank from the app says, Frank, what's your prediction for the month of November in the Central Division? Man, I think the Central, I don't think I'm going out on a limb by saying the Central has been the best division in the NHL. It is bonkers on a night-to-night basis. Colorado, Utah, Winnipeg, all right there in the mix. The Dallas Stars, again, we mentioned how up and down their season has been. The Blackhawks have been very fun to watch. The Predators, best part of their season was making it onto an SNL skit on Saturday night. And the Minnesota Wild and St. Louis Blues have been very, very disappointing so far. St. Louis Blues trying to get back on track, hosting the Edmonton Oilers on Monday night. I'm not a believer in the Blues. Because I think that they're a mostly mediocre roster, but I think the Wild have a lot to gain, and I think you're going to see the Wild turn the corner in a pretty significant way here moving forward. My prediction would be watch the Wild bolt up the standings in the month of November. I think they've got some big things ahead, and I'm really liking what I'm seeing, of course, from the Utah Mammoth. So I asked you for any guesses on my fifth team. James says, don't tell me Edmonton's in your top 5. Come on, man. Calgary Flames fan here. I get it, James. We know we see you every week from Calgary. No, I don't have the Edmonton Oilers in my inner circle of 5 right now because I think, again, they've been over-reliant on Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. Yes, this is the best defense core that this team has had in the McDavid and Draisaitl era. But I haven't seen enough from them with some very average goaltending yet in the first few weeks of the season. I guess you could say, oh, hey, you're a hypocrite. You said Florida will get there. Maybe Edmonton gets there, but I'm not liking what I'm seeing so far. So who is my fifth team? Any guesses? I'll just give you a second to see if you want to throw it in the chat as we circle through our list here to make sure that we got to everything on our rundown today. We did. And the other team that's in my inner circle of cup contenders. I want to say I'm going to go Winnipeg Jets. I've been on the fence about them, but I mentioned that I have questions about their defense and how they've defended in front of Connor Hellebuck. I think what keeps the Jets right now on November 3rd in that inner circle of cup contenders is that Connor Hellebuck is fully capable of reproducing season after season a .925 save percentage. So those are my 5 teams for right now. I've got the Carolina Hurricanes, the Florida Panthers, Colorado Avalanche, Vegas Golden Knights, and today the Winnipeg Jets, all subject to change, which is really kind of the most fun part about the NHL season. Utah would be fun. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and 2006 also asked. Utah, not yet. Could be entering that conversation later, and I think Utah is entering the conversation as a whole, particularly over the next 5 to 7 years. You're going to hear them repeatedly in that contender conversation, but not there just yet, and I think they need some more depth. So Winnipeg should theoretically be getting stronger. As someone mentioned in our chat here, James, about the Jets and their guys returning from injury, Adam Lowry, Cole Perfetti, and now Morgan Barron. Well, that's the fun part about the NHL season, is watching that list change many times over the course of a 6-month slog. Thanks so much for joining us today on this week's edition of the NHL Insider Notebook here on the BR app. The chat was great. Love to see your versions of your cup contenders. We'll check in on those again next month, but we'll be back next week Back to our usual time next Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. You know where to find us. Until then, have a great week and enjoy the games.